I've just been compelled to do it. And when I went through breast cancer treatment, and at that time, I was happy to tell anybody what was happening, but the thing that I could not bear to do was to repeat it over and over again. And so I started what would have just been a blog, but it was just ahead of that. And so it was an email distribution list, and it was a great outlet for me because it meant that I didn't sit with anything. And then I started just including all the silly things about it and the difficult things and anything else that might be going on in my life. And people started encouraging me to get it into book form, and it eventually did become my first book. So I was very excited about that. And then several years later, after taking a trip with my younger daughter for her senior project in high school to Nepal and Bhutan, where she was studying the question, what is happiness? And wanted to study meditation and Buddhism at a monastery in Kathmandu, we were not comfortable with her just going off to the other side of the world on her own. She had just turned 17. So we decided that I would go too. And while she was there, I trekked to the Annapurna Base Camp. And we were both keeping journals.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Meg Stafford. How are you doing, Meg?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Likewise. Happy to be here.
Where are you calling in from?
Littleton, Massachusetts, which is about 30 miles north and west of Boston.
I love that. I was up there about a year or two ago, and it's funny. We were just talking before the show. We're actually going to get a little bit of snow today.
Yes. we tomorrow we'll start our 2 days worth of getting 1 to 2 feet. So we'll see where we actually end up. But
Absolutely, and I get down south. It's different because they don't have the same equipment as you and I do. I'm in Wisconsin, so it's kind of
right.
funny because they're preparing for like 4 to 5 inches, and we're like, okay, that sounds like a Tuesday.
Right, exactly. Get that lots of times. But yeah. And at least we're not getting the ice, because that really is difficult to deal with.
Oh,
So
absolutely, absolutely. So I love to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How do we know each other?
through the podcast collective.
One of the
That's
things one of the things I love about the podcast collective is the fact that you meet so many interesting guests, and as you've seen, there's so many different podcasts, whether they're people producing shows or trying to be guests on shows. It's one of those
Yep.
amazing things that it's literally for everyone.
Yeah, and some are doing both. They're both producing and being guests. So that's not something I've done yet, is be a host, although I know I would enjoy it, because I have worked for many years interviewing people from the point of view as a psychotherapist. So it's something I love, talking to people and learning about them. So it's interesting for me to be on the other end, uh, and being the one interviewed. But it's a conversation. That's what I'm comfortable with.
It's one of those things that's so fascinating. I suppose you can definitely attest to this. I'm on episode 137 right now, and it's so interesting what people come up with in their own stories. And I wouldn't say come up with, but what I mean is that they share, and it's just so fascinating because you think you have someone pegged down who they are, especially athletes, uh, educators, whatever. You kind of have that trajectory in your mind, and then they throw you a curveball, and it's just so fascinating to see what makes people tick.
Yep, it is ever interesting, because two people given the exact same set of circumstances may deal with it very differently. And that's a it's a there's so much that informs people's decisions, from their circumstances at the moment, what their past has been, what they're looking towards. But it's amazing to see the different paths that people take from, even from the same place. It's like when I've been to high school reunions, it's fascinating. We all grew up in the same area. Certainly, we might have very different backgrounds, but it's fascinating to see where we go from there and where we've all ended up, both geographically and in our lives.
Meg, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. That comic book issue number one, that origin story. Who's Meg?
I have been a social worker and therapist for many years. I worked in different kinds of settings, from a psychiatric hospital, a medical hospital. I directed a psychiatric halfway house. And I have been a writer for almost as many years, or for even more years. I started writing columns for my local newspaper um, almost 40 years ago, and that continued with my local newspaper until it folded a few years ago. And then I started telling stories live, which has been really fun and interesting. And now I have written two books, and I'm excited about that. And I've been for an online paper, I've been writing pieces about events that um, performances, art openings, musical performances, and my experiences of those things.
How did you end up writing for a paper?
I knew that I needed to write. It's just always been something that's important to me. And when I lived in Somerville, Mass, which is just outside of Boston, just right next to Cambridge, I approached the editor and asked if I could write columns. And they essentially very kindly gave me really carte blanche to write about whatever I wanted. So I was in my 20s at that point, and I had received a flyer about prepaid funeral arrangements, which in my 20s I thought was hilarious. So I wrote a piece about that. I wrote a piece about voicemail, which was up and coming at that time. And I wrote about really whatever um, was gripping me at the moment. So I wrote about um, feet. I wrote about relationships. I was certainly working with that. I might write about something I observed about a family in a restaurant, or all different kinds of things. But it has always been a tremendous outlet for me. I wrote about our pets and their antics, and our kids once they were born, and um, it's it's uh, it's a delightful thing. And my columns just always kind of wrote themselves, because I would have something to say and I just like couldn't wait to get it down. And I might be going for a bike ride, and then it would just it would all form in my head and tumble out once I got home and could write them down.
So you mentioned you wrote for a column. What do you think prompted your excitement for writing? How did that start?
That started very early. So I like to say I was I had a pen in my crib, but it's literally when I was 3 or 4 years old, I started writing little books, and I would tape them together or staple them together, um, and that continued on for a number of years. And then I didn't get back to it until I was um, in my later 20s, and after I had already been working. I actually took off several months from my social work job because I wanted to focus on it. And I was working for a caterer to support myself. And I realized that I love it, but I was not making a living at it right off the bat. So I got a job that was less than full time, so I would have some time to write, and try to continue doing that as much as possible. So um, it's even after my kids were born and I went into private practice to have complete control over my schedule. I was in the office 3 days a week, still am in the office 3 days a week. And that left some time to devote to my writing. And that has always worked out really well. So I've been able to do both. But the writing has been, it's been deep within for like forever. So was it's always been important for me to get it out, share my thoughts.
So it's one thing to think about writing or practice it. What made you really commit to it? Besides the fact that, of course, you mentioned that you kind of took some time off from what some people would call a full time job to go all in on your writing. What do you think made you do that?
It was really the passion for it, and a combination. I both felt like I had things to say, and also I love the craft of it. I love finding just the right words to express either how I'm feeling about something, or if I'm writing about someone else and something I'm attending, I love to like really nail it so it really conveys um, exactly what was happening and what it might feel like to be there. And I've had a few people across different types of events reflect back to me that how much they appreciate that, and I've just been compelled to do it. And um, when I went through breast cancer treatment, and at that time I was happy to tell anybody what was happening, but the thing that I could not bear to do was to repeat it over and over again. And so I started what would have just been a blog, but it was just ahead of that. And so it was an email distribution list, and it was a great outlet for me because it meant that I didn't sit with anything. And then I started just including all the silly things about it and the difficult things and anything else that might be going on in my life. And people started encouraging me to get it into book form, and it eventually did become my first book. So I was very excited about that. And then several years later, after taking a trip with my younger daughter for her senior project in high school to Nepal and Bhutan, where she was studying the question, what is happiness? And wanted to study meditation and Buddhism at a monastery in Kathmandu, we were not comfortable with her just going off to the other side of the world on her own. She had just turned 17. So we decided that I would go too. And while she was there, I trekked to the Annapurna Base Camp. And we were both keeping journals. She was required to, as part of her project, but it was something that was important for me. And it was interesting to see our different perspectives about what we were each doing. There was a similarity in that it was really meditative for both of us, but also very different. She was literally sitting and meditating, and I was hiking for hours a day. So it became the kernel of the idea for my next book. The book does go back, the first part does go back and forth between our two perspectives, hers as a 17-year-old being miles away from anywhere, and mine as her mom also being miles away from anywhere and from her. Um, and that became the first part of the book. And the second part was our older daughter was living in very rural Colombia in the northwestern corner and working as an observer witness for people in the peace community there who were not aligned with the military, the paramilitary, or the guerrillas. And so they literally, at 22, she's 23, she literally would walk with people from place to place wearing a bright blue t-shirt in order to keep them safe from the other factions who weren't um, trusting of their neutrality. And this was terrifying as a parent. So I went to visit her there. So the community that she lived in was a 45-minute open air Jeep ride and an hour and a half hike to get to the community. So their Saturday shopping was like an all day event. But it was amazing to visit her there, and and meet some of the people there, and meet a woman in particular in the corner who was very kind. So the second part of the book goes back and forth between our perspectives. And the last part is about, like, where's my husband in all this, and how did we come by our passion for travel, um, and that is some people's favorite part of the book, even. But it's so. But I thought that it would be interesting and helpful for people to see how we navigated a challenging time, and also be interested in the places that we were and how we dealt with it. So that's how that came about. It's a long answer to a short question.
I don't know. That's fascinating. On everyone's journey, you make a decision not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time where you just went for it?
Probably the those trips are some. It's wanting to encourage them to go for it, and uh, I feel like that loosed loosened in me a desire um, to jump into writing the books and to putting it out there and giving it a try. And also, it brought me back to my own love of travel. And I have since been on biking trips in many in Portugal and Denmark, and we're going to do one in Italy this summer. That's been with my husband, and to go to New Zealand, and it totally ignited my passion in that way. But it also has really encouraged me to get my words out there. It's something that I'm excited about, and to take a chance. And I've kept a foot in both worlds, uh, because it is hard to fully jump into it and just say, oh, okay, I'm going to abandon my means of income to get there. But it has made me excited to try live storytelling and to um, tackle it in some other ways.
Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on right now?
I am uh, um, contemplating two directions. So one, and there will be another book, but it's I had thought about um, compiling some of my many columns and putting them into groupings, because they fall into loosely into groups about relationships, or about um, the animals, or about humorous situations and following that. But I can't decide whether I would want to just write about those things and include clips, or how I would do it. So I'm considering that, and I'm also thinking about offering to people in this area, at least to start. I've already had invitations to attend people's events and to write about them, and one woman actually told me that she felt like the description gave her even more than the photographs of the evening, that it brought that evening back to her. And I was really touched by that. And so I thought that other people might find that interesting also, to have an account of a document that reflects a really important event. This was a party, and a retirement party for some people who had worked for her, where my husband works. So I know some of these people and had been there. But um, I also attended a fundraising concert for a woman who was raising funds to support a free festival, music festival in Vilnius in Lithuania, and she had invited me to write about it so she could convey to other people what it's like and what the goal is. And that was very exciting. I actually went to Lithuania, to it'll be 3 years ago, to attend the festival and write about the performances there. So uh, I think that would be interesting, and interesting for people and for me to go to different events that are important to people, and write about that. My website is www.megstafford.com. You can also get to the book directly through www.whowillaccompany.you.com. So those are two good places. My Facebook page, that Meg Stafford, and Instagram. I post some pictures and uh, quick thoughts. Meg Stafford 2183. Those are the best places. But and on my blog, you can find some of the pieces that I've written about other, like a sculpture opening and other concerts that have been fun for me.
Well, Meg, I can't wait to jump into that. I'm very excited. Of course, we'll take it in the show notes. Again, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. And I wish you all the best going forward in your conversations with others. And may we all continue to expand each other's world and what we see and learn from one another.
I couldn't agree more. We'll talk soon. That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.